I'm Agatha Bonner, 76 years old, and the casserole dish was still warm in my hands when I heard my grandson say the words that stopped me cold. Daddy says you're going to be useless soon. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't hear him, but because I needed a moment to steady the tremor in my hands outside the kitchen window. The rain had started again, soft and steady, the way it always does in South Haven. I looked down at the carrots I'd been slicing and told myself to just keep going before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace. My name is Agatha Bonner, and I live alone now in a small blue cottage at the edge of town. The kind of place that creaks when the wind shifts and smells like rose soap and old paperbacks. I taught chemistry at South Haven High for 30 years. My husband Thomas was the school principal. We built our life on education and humility, never flashy, but always decent. We planned to travel after retirement, but Thomas passed 3 months after I left the classroom. His heart gave out while pulling weeds in the garden. Audrey's house is a 20-minute walk from mine. I make that walk nearly every day to help with the kids. Nolan's in middle school, now already mimicking his father's posture and dry tone. Sylvia's younger but sharper notices things. She asked me the other day, why my hands shake when I pour tea. Lawrence, my son-in-law, likes dinner ready by 6 on the dot. He works in insurance. Something corporate, always in pressed shirts with that gleam of someone who wants to be seen as important. He's not cruel in any obvious way. He just has a way of making people feel small, especially when they're not useful to him. He calls me free maid the first time I heard it. He said it behind my back, then in front of the children. Now it's just what I am to him, a placeholder, someone to cook, fold laundry, and disappear when company arrives. I've never said anything back, not once in all these years. Audrey's marriage to him changed her. She used to have fire, led her college debate team, wrote essays that challenged deans. Now she barely raises her voice. Always tired, always apologizing for things that don't need apologies. That night after the casserole was in the oven and the table was set, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. Gray bun, neat blouse, soft slacks. I looked tidy, the way I always tried to be, but I didn't recognize my eyes. They used to be sharper. The night ended like most nights do. Lawrence walked in, gave a passing glance at the dinner, wrinkled his nose, made some offhand comment about my cooking being predictable. Audrey came home after 8 circles. Under her eyes, kissed my cheek, said thank you, and meant it as I walked home in the rain. I wondered when I'd stopped being someone with a name and started being the help. I couldn't remember exactly when it had happened, only that Thomas would never have let it. But Lawrence has a big company banquet coming up, and he needs someone to keep the kids quiet in a corner. He's getting promoted, and I'm supposed to show up at the Riverview restaurant looking clean but invisible. He made that very clear. I pressed the navy dress one last time before bed. It used to be my favorite. Thomas gave me the pearl necklace I'd wear with it. I caught my reflection again before turning off the light. Same dress, same pearls. But tomorrow, something would be different. I didn't know how yet, only that I wasn't going to sit in silence anymore. The rain had stopped by morning. I stepped outside with a thermos of tea and listened to the dripping eaves, trying to ease the tightness in my chest. A breeze moved through the dogwoods, and somewhere nearby a screen door banged shut. I was pulling the blue dress from the hanger when the phone rang. It was Audrey. Her voice sounded rushed, soft. Mom, could you pick up Sylvia today? She has an early dismissal because of that track meet. Of course, I said. 2 o'clock. Thank you, she said. And Mom, about tonight? I'll be there, I said before she could finish. After we hung up, I circled the date again on the calendar, the company banquet, Lawrence's promotion night. I folded the dress carefully, laid it flat across the bed, and ironed the sleeves again, even though they were already smooth. 15 years ago, when Audrey brought Lawrence to meet us, he'd worn a neat blazer and brought lilies in brown paper. You raised her well, he'd said, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Educators shape the world. Thomas had chuckled afterward and said, a little rehearsed, but at least he tried. The first few years of their marriage seemed happy. They bought a brick house with wide front steps. Nolan came along soon after then, Sylvia 2 years later. Audrey had always worked secretary at an insurance office downtown. But when she got pregnant again, Lawrence said she should stay home. Children need their mother, he said over Sunday dinner. Besides, I make enough for all of us. Thomas stirred his tea without looking up. Audrey's always had her own paycheck. That matters. Lawrence smiled. Of course, if she wants to work, that's up to her. But the way Audrey went quiet said everything. After Sylvia was born, she stopped going out much. She gave up her job, said she'd go back when things calmed down. They never did. The first time I noticed the shift was subtle. Lawrence came home one evening and said, "You forgot to water the plants, Agatha. They're wilting." He said it loud enough for Nolan to hear like a lesson. "That's what happens when you get older," he added. Nolan had looked confused. "But Grandma's smart," he'd said. "She knows science." Lawrence laughed. "School smarts and real-world smarts aren't the same, bud." I stood in the hallway holding 2 mugs, my hands shaking slightly. I didn't walk in. I didn't say a word. After Thomas passed, I started spending more time with Audrey and the kids. I thought it might help us all to have a little extra company. At first, Lawrence said he appreciated it. "It's nice having someone to keep an eye on things," he told me once. "Saves us from paying a sitter." But over time, his tone changed. Sometimes I'd hear him mutter to Audrey in the kitchen, not low enough to be private. "She's got nowhere else to go. We're doing her a favor." Or to the kids, "Grandma's forgetful again." "Don't be like that when you grow up." I thought about telling Audrey, but whenever I started, she'd look so tired, I'd stop myself. And sometimes, I wasn't even sure she'd disagree with him. Then the jokes started. "Old lady still knows how to use the oven," he'd say if dinner was warm. Or, "Try not to burn anything, Agatha. We've got guests." The kids picked it up fast. Nolan once pushed his plate away and said, "This doesn't taste right. Daddy says you're not a good cook." I reminded him that I'd taught hundreds of students run after-school baking clubs and that his mother had grown up on my recipes. Audrey had cut in, told Nolan not to be rude. But it was a rare moment. Most times, she just looked away. I tried again one afternoon, folding towels beside her while the kids played in the yard. "Are you happy?" I asked gently. She was quiet a long time. "He's a good father," she said finally. "He doesn't hit. He keeps a roof over our heads." "That's not what I asked." She looked down at her hands. "Not everyone gets what you and Dad had, Mom." That was rare. I didn't push further. Just said I'll always be here for you. After that, Lawrence seemed to ramp up his little war. "Free maid," he'd whisper with a smirk when no one else could hear. "Better than the nursing home, right?" I stopped reacting. He took it as permission to keep going. One night, as I was peeling potatoes, he walked into the kitchen, stood behind me and said, "You know, you should be grateful I let you stay around. Some men would have put you in a facility by now." I turned, still holding the knife. "Excuse me." He smiled. "You cook clean and stay out of the way." Perfect setup, I wanted to shout. But I thought of Sylvia upstairs, and I swallowed the words instead. That night, I walked home slower than usual. It had started to rain again. My coat stuck to my shoulders, and the air smelled of wet leaves. By the time I reached my porch, I could feel Thomas's absence like a weight. He would have known what to say. He would have stood up for me. But there was no one left to speak for me. The navy dress hung in the hallway. I pressed the collar flat with my palms, smoothed the fabric, and laid the pearl necklace beside it. Tomorrow would be the banquet. Lawrence's night. His name in lights, his company toasting him with flutes of champagne. And me, I'd be seated in the corner, with napkins and juice boxes, making sure the kids didn't wander too close to the grown-up table. But something had shifted in me. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure I could stay quiet. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I wanted to. The Riverview sat just above the water windows, lined with string lights that flickered against the current. When we arrived, a tall man in a dark blazer greeted Lawrence with a wide smile and ushered us toward the reception area. Audrey kept close behind him, holding Sylvia's hand. I walked beside Nolan, who tugged at his collar. Inside, the space was polished and modern. Soft jazz played beneath the quiet clinking of glassware. A young woman led me and the children toward a table near the far corner of the room. It was set neatly with silver napkin rings and smaller menus printed in bright colors for the kids. "This table's been reserved for families with children," she said, politely gesturing for us to sit. Sylvia looked around. "Why can't we sit with Mommy and Daddy?" I smoothed the napkin in front of her. "It's quieter here," I said. "We'll have more space." Audrey stopped by a few minutes later. Her dress was elegant black satin with a thin silver belt. She looked at our table, then back toward the main seating. "I asked if we could be closer," she said under her breath. Lawrence said it wouldn't look right. "We'll be fine," I told her. "You go on." She hesitated, then nodded and returned to her place beside him. The waitstaff brought juice for the children. I ordered a small garden salad, though the main menu offered far more elaborate choices. Nolan picked at his fries, while Sylvia stirred ketchup with the edge of her fork. Lawrence was easy to spot. He moved from one cluster of coworkers to another, laughing, shaking hands, patting shoulders. Audrey trailed behind, quiet and composed, smiling when someone turned toward her, but never joining the conversation. I watched from the corner, folding my hands in my lap. "Everyone wants to talk to Daddy," Nolan said, watching him across the room. "He's worked hard for tonight," I replied, my voice low. Around 8, the speeches began. A man with graying hair stepped onto a small stage and tapped the microphone. "We'd like to take a moment to recognize some of our department leaders," he said. "Let's begin with someone many of you already know, our new head of strategic underwriting, Lawrence Whitman." Applause rose across the room. Lawrence made his way up to the microphone, grinning as he accepted a glass award, and shook hands with the speaker. I stood to get the children some water from the bar at the back of the hall. I had just turned when I heard Lawrence's voice carry across the microphone. "Hey, free maid, bring me and Randall some wine. Would you... Gotta be good for something at your age." The room fell silent. My fingers tightened around the glasses. For a moment, I couldn't move. I felt heat rising to my cheeks, my shoulders stiff. I saw Audrey's face across the room, frozen lips, slightly parted. I didn't lower my eyes. Instead, I straightened and stepped forward. "Lawrence," I said clearly, "I taught your boss's son chemistry. Randall, good evening. Winston was always a fine student." The younger man standing beside the speaker turned eyes wide. "Mrs. Bonner," he said, surprised. "You taught me at South Haven." I gave him a small nod. "You won the county science fair that year. Copper sulfate crystals, if I remember right." Randall turned to his son. "You never told me your chemistry teacher was Audrey's mother." "She was the best one I had," Winston replied. Lawrence opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "I'm not staff," I said, still holding the water glasses. "And I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Randall raised his glass. "Then let's toast not just to promotions, but to the teachers who raise the next generation." Applause followed. Around the room, glasses lifted. Some guests smiled in my direction. Lawrence remained motionless, his face drained of color. Audrey stepped toward me, her voice low. "Mom, please not here." "It's all right, Audrey," I said. "We'll finish this in our own time." Lawrence moved quickly through the crowd and caught my elbow. What do you think you're doing? He muttered, steering me toward the hallway near the restrooms. Are you trying to ruin everything I've worked for? I didn't pull away. You humiliated me in front of my boss, he hissed. 10 years of work. Do you know what this means? You did that yourself, I said evenly. I'm no longer part of your arrangement. I'm not your help, not your servant. His face shifted. You think Audrey will side with you? She won't. That's between the two of you. But as of today, I'm setting my own boundary. You don't get to make demands. I'm not, I replied. I'm making a decision. I won't be spoken to that way again. I won't stand in your kitchen and pretend this is normal. His expression changed again, something smaller, more uncertain behind the eyes. You'll regret this. I already regret not speaking up sooner. Audrey appeared at the end of the hallway. Lawrence, she asked, is everything okay? He straightened. Fine, he said. Just fine. She looked at me. Mom. We were just clearing the air, I told her. The children. They're with Winston, she said softly. He's showing them how to fold napkins into animals. The three of us returned to the banquet together. Lawrence moved ahead quickly and reclaimed his seat at the main table. Audrey and I sat again with the children. Nolan leaned over. Why did Daddy yell at you? Sometimes people speak before they think I said, but we're okay now. He looked away, eyes uncertain. Later, as we drove home, no one said much. The children dozed in the back seat, their heads tipping to the side with each turn. Audrey sat beside Lawrence up front, one hand gripping her purse. When we reached their house, she turned to me. You could stay, she offered quickly. It's late. I'll call a cab, I said gently. It's all right. She looked like she wanted to say more, but nodded. Call me tomorrow. I will. As the door closed behind them, I waited on the porch for the car. Across the street, everything looked the same, the porch lights, the flower beds, the quiet stillness of late evening. But I knew nothing was the same anymore. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It felt like something new was beginning. The taxi dropped me off just before midnight. I let myself in, turned on the hallway light, and stood for a moment listening to the quiet. I filled the kettle and waited for the water to boil, one hand resting on the counter to still the tremor in my fingers. My heels were still pinching from the banquet, and my dress hung heavy with the scent of other people's perfume. The tea helped settle my breath, but sleep didn't come. I was still awake when the doorbell rang the next morning. Lawrence stood on the porch, jaw tight, eyes hard. You think that stunt you pulled last night was brave? He said, stepping forward before I could even speak. You embarrassed me. In front of Randall, in front of the whole company. I didn't let him pass the door. It's early, I said. You should leave. He forced a hand against the doorframe. You made me look like a fool. You did that yourself, I answered. He came inside anyway, uninvited, walked straight into my living room and sat in Thomas's old chair. I stayed standing. You've been resentful for years, he said, and for what I've let you into our home. I've let you see the kids. I've provided for everyone. You've never respected anyone but yourself, I said quietly. He leaned forward. You want something? Money, fine. Tell me how much. You don't get to destroy my reputation for free. I don't want your money. He laughed. Then what? An apology. You got it. Happy no, I said, because it's not real. He fell silent. I'm not coming back to that house, I added. Not while you're in it. I'll see the children somewhere else. If Audrey wants help, she can meet me here. At the park. Anywhere else. You can't cut me off from my own children. I'm not cutting anyone off, I said. I'm stepping out of your orbit. He stood up suddenly. Audrey won't stand for this. She needs me. Maybe. But I don't. He looked at the door, then back at me. This isn't over. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. That afternoon, I sat on the back steps with a second cup of tea and tried to let the silence settle again. The clouds hung low and the wind had a sharpness to it. I heard no cars, no radios, no voices, just wind chimes from 2 houses over. Audrey didn't call that day, or the day after. On the third morning, I began sorting through the back room where I'd stored old notebooks, test tubes, and lab binders from my year's teaching. I found my tutoring notes tucked between lesson plans pages filled with equations and careful sketches from long ago. I opened the address book and began dialing. By the end of the week, I had 3 students lined up. 2 were high school juniors. 1 was a college freshman home for the semester and already struggling with organic chemistry. On Saturday, my phone rang again. Mom Audrey's voice was soft, uncertain. Hi, sweetheart. We're okay, she said, in case you were wondering. I've been thinking about you. There was a pause. Lawrence is still furious. He says you've made him look weak, that his job's on the line. I didn't lie, I said. I know, she said quietly. I don't know what to do. The silence stretched. Then I heard her sniffle. I don't want to raise my kids in a home where people talk that way, she added. You have choices, I told her. I've started a course, she said suddenly. Accounting certification. At night after the kids go to sleep. Lawrence doesn't know. I blinked. That's wonderful, Audrey. I paid for it myself. I sold the earrings you gave me at graduation. You could have asked me. I didn't want to. We sat on the phone like that for a while, neither of us rushing to hang up. She didn't say much more about Lawrence. I didn't ask. The following Wednesday, as I was dusting the bookshelves, someone knocked at the door. It was Winston Kingsley. Mrs. Bonner, he said. I hope this isn't a bad time. Not at all. I was hoping we could talk. About the other night, I invited him in. We sat at the kitchen table with a pot of black tea between us. He asked how long I'd known Lawrence. 15 years, I said. Too long, I suppose. He leaned back in his chair. My father doesn't usually take sides, but he noticed the way Lawrence looked at you. The tone? That didn't sit right with him. I nodded, but didn't reply. There've been questions, he said, lowering his voice. About some of Lawrence's work, the way he handles elderly clients. Unusual paperwork, adjustments made at the last minute. Always technically within policy. But the outcomes aren't fair. I folded my hands. We don't have proof yet, he added. But if you know anyone affected, it might help us understand the pattern. I thought of the woman from the senior council who'd once told me her insurance didn't cover her water damage. I remembered how flustered she'd been, how unsure she was about what she'd signed. I might, I said. Give me a few days. When Winston left, I sat for a long while at the table, the sunlight stretching in through the back window. I reached for my old notepad and started a list. Names, phone numbers, stories. By evening, I'd made 6 calls. The next morning, I knocked on a door 2 streets over. A blue house with lilacs in the yard. Vivian Ashley answered. 82. A widow. Her bathroom had flooded 6 months ago. The insurance covered only a third of the damage. I signed something she told me. The man said it was to speed up the claim. I looked through her papers. The print was small. The clause wasn't standard. It redirected her policy to a different section 1 that minimized coverage. That man, she said his name was Lawrence. I looked up from the documents. I'd like to help, I said. She reached for my hand. Thank you. That night, I boxed up a copy of everything and labeled it clearly. In the morning, I would call Winston, and this time, I wouldn't be alone. I called Winston the next morning and asked if he could arrange a meeting with his father. He didn't hesitate. "He'll see you Tuesday," he said. "Bring whatever you have." I gathered everything into a manila folder. Vivian's documents, copies of 2 other policies I'd looked over, and a list of names from the senior counsel. Every case had a similar thread. The clients were elderly. The language was vague, and in every instance, Lawrence's name appeared on the paperwork. The office was on the 6th floor of a glass-paneled building downtown. Randall Kingsley met me in the reception area and invited me into a private conference room. The windows looked out over the river. "I understand you have something to show me," he said, gesturing toward the table. I laid the folder down and opened it. "These are real people," I told him. They believed they were protected. They weren't. He reviewed the first few pages silently, then looked up. "How did you get this?" "They trusted me enough to share," I said. Randall studied me for a moment. "You're not doing this out of spite." "No," I said. "I'm doing it because someone should." He nodded and closed the folder. "We'll begin a full internal review. Quietly for now. If these claims check out, corrective action will be taken." "Vivian Ashley," I added. "She lost most of her savings making repairs that should have been covered. She deserves another look." He made a note. "We'll start there." When I left the building, the wind had picked up along the riverfront. I stood outside for a few minutes, watching the current move under the bridge. That evening, my phone rang again. It was Audrey. "Mom, do you know anything about what's happening at Lawrence's company?" I hesitated. "Why, he's been called into meetings. They're saying there's an investigation." "He came home furious, slammed a cabinet door so hard it cracked. He thinks it's your fault." I spoke to someone, I said carefully, but not about him directly. About policies, about people who were taken advantage of. She didn't respond right away. "He might lose the promotion," she said after a moment. "If he's done nothing wrong, there's nothing to worry about." "He's worried," she whispered. "He keeps pacing the house. He won't stop checking his phone. And he's angry. At everything. At me. At the kids." "Are you okay?" "I don't know." We didn't speak long after that. She said she needed to start dinner. I said I'd call later in the week. On Sunday, Audrey and the kids showed up just after 10. Sylvia ran straight to the living room and curled up in her usual spot on the couch. Nolan followed more slowly, backpack slung over one shoulder. Audrey stood in the doorway for a long time, looking unsure. "Come in," I said gently. She stepped inside. "Lawrence is working all day. We told him we were going to the park. We made pancakes together, just like we used to." Sylvia helped stir the batter. Nolan cracked the eggs. Audrey set the table. After lunch, when the kids went outside to play, she stayed behind with the dishes. "I applied for a new job," she said while rinsing a pan. "Chief accountant at a construction firm. They're hiring in the next town over. Good pay. Benefits." I dried a plate. "That's a big step. I haven't told him. He thinks I'm still doing the certification course. What happens if you get it, I don't know." She placed the last dish in the rack and wiped her hands. "I just want to know I have a choice," she said. "That I'm not stuck." I nodded. Later, as they were leaving, Audrey hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom, for listening, for still being here." "You always have a place with me," I told her. She smiled, but there was worry behind it. "I'm proud of you," I said. When they walked down the driveway, I stood at the door a moment longer. Nolan turned and waved once before disappearing behind the hedge. 3 days later, Winston called. "Mrs. Bonner, the internal review is complete. My father wanted you to know, Lawrence won't be fired. There wasn't enough hard evidence for that. But he's being demoted. The promotion is gone. So is his bonus. And his accounts are being reassigned for oversight. I understand, I said. We'll also be making a direct payment to Vivian Ashley, he added. She'll be reimbursed in full. Thank you. You did the right thing, he said, even when it wasn't easy. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window, watching the wind move through the maple trees in the backyard. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. That Sunday, Audrey came over with a different look in her eyes. She carried herself taller, smiled more easily. I got the job, she said. They offered it Thursday. I start next month. That's wonderful. It's more than I thought I'd ever make. And flexible hours, too. I'll be able to take the kids to school and still be home most afternoons. Have you told Lawrence yes? He wasn't happy. But the paycheck softened the blow. And the kids, Nolan asked me last week why Daddy doesn't come with us to Grandma's anymore. What did you say I told him? Sometimes grown-ups don't get along? And that's okay. She paused, then added, he didn't ask again. We made lunch and sat on the porch afterward. The breeze had cooled a little, and the sky was that soft gray it gets before a long rain. Sylvia came outside, holding a storybook. Nolan trailed behind her. Grandma? He asked, can we stay for dinner too? Audrey glanced at me. I smiled. Of course. We stayed out on the porch until the sun dipped behind the trees. And in that quiet, I felt something beginning to repair, not all at once, but enough to hold on to. Enough to carry us into what came next. The Sunday visits became our rhythm. Audrey and the kids would show up mid-morning, arms full of groceries or toys, depending on the week. We'd cook, eat, talk, and pretend for a few hours that the world outside didn't press in quite so hard. One afternoon, while the kids were drawing at the kitchen table, Audrey leaned in and said, I've started setting a little money aside, just a few dollars here and there. Lawrence doesn't know. You're being smart, I said. I'm not sure what I'll do with it yet, she added. I just want to have a choice. I don't want to be trapped. She hesitated before she said the next part. Divorce has crossed my mind, she said. Not because I've made a decision, but because I want to know the door's not locked. I listened, letting her words settle in the air between us. Later that week, I got a call from Patricia Donovan, a friend from the senior center. She ran a local book club and sat on the South Haven Senior Council. We'd taught together years ago, she literature and I chemistry. Agatha, she said, a few of the council members brought up exit insurance at our last meeting. Something about claim rejections that don't add up. I asked if I could meet with them. She arranged a coffee gathering the following morning. 3 women, all over 70, shared nearly identical stories. Minor damages, flooding a fallen tree, a broken pipe, followed by confusing forms and lower than expected payouts. In 2 cases, they signed adjustment documents they hadn't fully understood. Who handled your claims? I asked. The name came up more than once, Lawrence Whitman. I asked their permission to review the paperwork. They agreed. When I examined the contracts, I noticed the same pattern. Supplemental forms misrepresented as routine. Subclauses redirecting payment responsibilities. It was all legal, but only barely. And always leveraged against people least likely to challenge it. I added the new files to my folder and contacted Winston. We met again at the same small cafe downtown. My father's already moving forward, he said. But the more examples, the better. I handed over the folder. These folks aren't looking for lawsuits, I told him. They just want what was promised. He nodded, flipping through the pages. You've done more in a month than some of our internal auditors manage in a year. I'm just a teacher, I said. Maybe he smiled, but you've built a stronger case than most. 2 days later, I heard from Vivian again. Agatha, they reimbursed me, she said, voice shaking. The full amount, plus interest. I had to sit down when I read the check. I smiled. I'm glad to hear it. And they said there would be oversight from now on. New training, new audits. I think you scared them straight. I didn't do it alone, I told her. You had the courage to speak up. That weekend, Audrey and the kids came early. It was one of the first warm Saturdays of spring. We opened all the windows and spent the morning baking cookies. Nolan measured the flour. Sylvia kept trying to sneak chocolate chips into her mouth when she thought no one was looking. When we sat down with coffee and milk, Audrey turned quiet. Lawrence knows we come here every Sunday, she said. He never says much, but I can feel it. He watches the clock. Has he tried to stop you, no? Not yet. I think he's more careful now. She looked over toward the kids who were laughing on the floor with a board game spread between them. He's still furious about the company investigation. He knows someone reported him, but he's not sure who. I didn't respond. He blames you, she added. But I think deep down he knows it wasn't just about one night. It's years of choices catching up. She looked back at me. Nolan's different lately. He doesn't copy Lawrence the way he used to. He's quieter, more thoughtful. Children notice more than we think, I said. Audrey nodded. I've seen him defend Sylvia a few times. When Lawrence raised his voice last week, Nolan stood in the doorway and just looked at him. He didn't say a word, but Lawrence stopped. She paused. That never used to happen. That evening, when it was time for them to go, I walked them to the door. Audrey gathered up Sylvia's jacket while Nolan slipped on his sneakers. As they stepped out onto the porch, I noticed a figure across the street. Lawrence stood just inside the window, arms crossed, watching. Audrey followed my gaze, then looked back at me. He does that, she said. Almost every time we come. She hesitated a moment longer. But I don't care. I watched them walk down the sidewalk together, Sylvia skipping Nolan, dragging his feet, Audrey walking with her shoulders just a little straighter than before. And I closed the door, not with fear, not with anger, but with the quiet certainty that something was shifting. And the worst part for Lawrence? It had nothing to do with me. It was that they were changing without his permission. The following Sunday, the house felt quieter than usual. Audrey and the kids came just after breakfast, bringing a peach cobbler and a new board game. Sylvia skipped through the doorway, already chattering about her latest school art project. Nolan lingered behind her, holding a bag of books he'd borrowed from the library. We set the table for lunch together. As Audrey sliced potatoes, she glanced toward the living room where the kids had set up the game. Something happened last night, she said, not looking up. Lawrence came home late. He'd had a few drinks. I waited. He didn't yell, she added quickly. But the mood, it was tense. He started muttering about people undermining him. Said the company still hadn't restored his accounts. Did he mention the investigation? She nodded. He's convinced someone inside is still watching him. I didn't respond. Audrey finished chopping and set the knife down. He knows something shifted. At work. At home. He just doesn't know what to do with it. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the kids were playing outside, Audrey joined me in the backyard. We sat beneath the maple tree where Thomas had built a bench decades earlier. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and we watched the kids from a distance. Lawrence asked why we never have Sunday dinners with his parents anymore, Audrey said. What did you tell him? I told him we were starting our own traditions. She folded her arms, rubbing her elbows gently. He didn't push, she added, but I could tell it bothered him. We watched Sylvia twirl in circles, her dress spinning, Nolan pretending not to watch, but grinning anyway. He's been quieter, Audrey said after a moment. Less controlling in some ways, but not kinder. It's like he's holding something in. Do you feel safe? Not unsafe? She answered carefully. just on guard. That week, she called me on a Tuesday afternoon. "I need to tell you something before you hear it from anyone else," she said. "Lawrence's demotion was made official today. They've reassigned all his high-level clients, no bonuses, and he has to report directly to someone who used to be under him." I stayed quiet. He came home and didn't say a word about it. But later, Nolan said he heard him slam a door. Then he took a walk. Just left without explanation. "How are the kids?" "They're fine." Nolan's more perceptive than I realized. He told Sylvia, "Don't worry, it's just a tantrum, grown-up version." I smiled faintly at that. "I think Nolan's pulling away from him," Audrey added. "He sees more now. He doesn't mimic his tone anymore. He even asked me last night, 'Do dads always have to be mad to be in charge?' What did you say?" I said no, that a good leader listens first. That weekend we took the kids to the community garden. Nolan wanted to help plant onions. Sylvia chased butterflies between the marigolds. Audrey stood beside me as I trimmed back one of the rosemary bushes. "Do you ever regret staying with Dad through the hard years?" she asked suddenly. "No. Even though it wasn't always easy," I looked at her. "We had respect. That made the hard years survivable." Audrey nodded, brushing dirt from her fingertips. "I want that for my kids. I want them to grow up in a house that feels steady, even when it's not perfect." We walked home in the late afternoon sun, the kids holding paper cones of kettle corn from a stand we passed on the corner. Back at the house, Nolan asked if he could stay overnight. "Just me," he said. "I have a science project, and Grandma's better at explaining stuff than Dad." Audrey looked at me, eyebrows raised. "You're always welcome," I told him. He gave a small, satisfied nod and went to unpack his backpack. That night, after he was asleep, Audrey sat at the kitchen table with me. "He's growing up so fast," she said. "He's asking questions I'm not always ready to answer." "You're doing fine." She hesitated. "I looked up a lawyer, just for a consultation. I haven't called yet." I reached for her hand, but didn't speak. "I don't know what I'll do, but knowing there's someone to talk to makes it feel less impossible." The next morning, Lawrence texted her at 7:15. "Tell Nolan to be ready by 9. Audrey typed back. "He stayed with Mom last night. We'll be back after lunch." He didn't respond. At noon, Audrey returned alone. She leaned in the doorway as Nolan gathered his books and bag. "Take your time," she whispered. "There's no rush." He nodded, hugged me tightly, and followed her out. That evening, I stood by the front window as the wind picked up. Clouds moved across the sky, and the street lamps flickered on, one by one. In the window across the street, Lawrence's silhouette appeared again, arms crossed, unmoving. But this time, I didn't look away. He had already lost what mattered most, and there wasn't a single thing he could do about it. By the end of that fall, our lives found a new kind of steadiness. Audrey and the kids visited, often slipping in and out of my little cottage, as if it had always been their second home. The air grew brisk, leaves rattled along the sidewalk, and Sunday lunches became a kind of gentle anchor for all of us. Lawrence's shadow faded quietly from our routines. Audrey no longer rushed to answer his texts, and the kids stopped flinching at the sound of his name. Nolan became more talkative, showing me science projects and asking questions about the world. Sylvia started leaving drawings tucked under my kitchen magnet's flowers, houses bright bursts of color she called happy days. One Sunday after lunch, Audrey lingered in the kitchen while the children played outside. She poured us both a cup of tea, her hands steady now, her voice stronger. "I've started a separate savings account," she said. "I'm not sure what comes next, but I want to know I have choices." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You've made a life for yourself and the kids, Audrey. That's something no one can take away. Lawrence never set foot in my home again. Sometimes I'd spot him across the street standing behind a window as his family returned from our house, but he never called out. The children grew used to the warmth of our gatherings, laughter at the table, Nolan reading aloud, Sylvia twirling through the living room. The quiet peace settled around us like a soft quilt. As months passed, even Audrey's worries grew lighter. Her job at Maryland Construction brought her new friends and confidence. Nolan once told me, "Grandma, I like it here. It's calm." I understood exactly what he meant. Looking back, I see now that justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet reclaiming of your own dignity, refusing to accept disrespect, setting a new example for the next generation, and opening a door for healing to begin. I learned that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it simply means choosing kindness and holding firm to your worth, even when others don't see it. I hope this story reminds you that it's never too late to draw a boundary, to start over, or to rediscover joy. If you've ever had to find your voice after years of silence or rebuilt your life one quiet Sunday at a time, I'd love for you to share your own story below. And if you found a bit of comfort here, I hope you'll join me again next time.